I'm Scott Alan Miller, and this is my life living in paradise. I live in Latin America, and I've been here for the last 10 years, between here and Europe, but I finally settled in Latin America. It has been an amazing journey, and for many of you, it is a journey that you are currently considering, and it is probably a time in which normally we say there's a right time for you, but right now we're probably going to say this is the time to get your rear end in motion and get to your paradise, which may be where I am, it may be somewhere similar, it may be somewhere completely different. Everyone has a different place that's perfect for them, but if you are in the United States, maybe Canada, but especially the United States now, we're seeing a massive number of people leaving the United States now. We're seeing them arrive all throughout the world, and people know something, and if you are worried, if you are excited about a potentially different future, if you just fear that change may not be going the way that you want, or maybe things will change, they are going the way you want, but they could change, there's just a lot of turmoil, it's a good time to make your options available to yourself, and I encourage you to do so. So we're going to talk about, instead of coming here to where I happen to be, which is often what we're talking about, we're going to talk about why right now is the moment for you to get things in motion and leave the United States. Maybe temporarily, maybe forever. It doesn't have to mean anything more than keeping your options open. So we're going to talk about that right after our bump. I left the United States in 2015 to live abroad, and really we've never looked back. We have visited a number of times. We spent a little bit of time needing to go back and live there at different times, but in general we have been so happy with our choice to move abroad. And one of the things that's so important about it is that it has given us so many opportunities, so much flexibility, so much freedom and safety that you really don't realize until you become an expat and you live abroad and you realize just some of the skills that you're going to obtain, yes, for sure. But also there is a lot of power in living outside of your home country and a lot of flexibility that people often don't realize. We have lots of videos digging into specific countries you may want to go to and why they're good. We have videos on the power of becoming an expat, all that stuff. You can just dig through our content here and see loads of resources on how to become an expat, why you want to become an expat, and all that. But today, I specifically want to address the Americans in the audience, because I know so many Americans, having grown up in the United States, it makes sense, that are, really worried about what the future holds, whether it's economic or political or the potential for big changes, and just the U.S. is swinging back and forth. It is a volatile environment, and even places like Vanguard have, for the first time in history, downgraded the American economy to worthless for the upcoming decade. That doesn't mean that that will happen, but these are worrisome indicators that make people feel that they may need to hedge a little bit, not just with their financial resources, certainly that is a good thing to hedge with, but also with their personal lives. And that's where we're going to talk today. When you live in your home country, you tend to be very much locked to it. Even if you have a lot of freedom of movement and you could go do things, there is a mental barrier that makes it difficult to do so. You may not have all of your paperwork in order. You may not know what it takes to move somewhere. You may not know where to go. And maybe you have all those things done and you are super flexible and absolutely not locked in any way. But for the average person, simply being in your home country gives you a lot of being stuck, even if it's just in your mind, right? Not saying that your country is making you stuck, but your mental state may be. People who move abroad tend to find that that the whole world is their oyster. They can go anywhere, do anything. They feel this freedom, and they learn how to leverage different locations for different things. Some people, it's best for them to find the right country to move to, do so, and they never move again. It's their paradise. It is perfect, and they are happy being there. They don't really like travel. They just had to tune their lives to find the right place. For others of us, we really like seeing the world and having variety, and you want to find a home base in most cases. That is a place that you really love, but you also want the flexibility and freedom to go to a different country when the weather turns bad for a season, or if there is any change in the economic climate, maybe you move on to a place that's more economically feasible for you, or you just like moving around, or maybe you're a digital nomad and taking advantage of short-term visas to make things simple. There's a lot of reasons that you may do that. Every expat has a little bit of a different story and desire and situation that's going to be perfect for them, obviously. But by and large, people who are remaining in their home country, even if there is no actual negatives happening in their country, it tends to feel like a trap situation, and that makes anything that seems like it might be happening bad feel much worse than it actually is, because not only is, let's say, the cost of living going up, but the feeling that you're trapped with that cost of living going up makes that cost of living increase that much scarier. And even just the risk of an increase in cost of living is very scary when you can't really easily simply move to a place where the cost of living is lower, or a place where inflation is lower. Likewise, if you get out and realize that you can move anywhere, anytime, you feel so free and released from those things. So it's a mental space of happiness more than anything else, but that's not the only factor. The United States really is going through a lot of turmoil right now, and that turmoil means no matter who you are, no matter what you're doing, you have risks from change. Change is always scary, and the U.S. is going through massive changes. Maybe they're for the good, maybe they're for bad, maybe they're neutral and just shifting things around. But no matter what, whatever you have is at risk because of change. That doesn't mean that you should have a negative reaction to it, but humans are naturally averse to change, and it represents a type of risk for us. Well, I have a house, I have a job. Any change could take me from a comfortable situation to an uncomfortable one. Maybe I lose my house, maybe I lose my job, one probably because of the other. Then you're homeless, you're out of work, and what do? You were doing fine before. Change from a position of being in a good spot is very scary. Sure, it could make things better, but it's just as likely to make things worse. And so that's a scary place when you're already in a good place. You're playing Monopoly, you've got plenty of money, you own a lot of properties, and then you suddenly randomly have to switch places with another player on the board. Sure, you might get someone who's better, but you're likely going to get someone who's worse because you're already in a decent position. So that's not something you want to do. You don't want to shake it up in that way. It's a big risk. You want to stick with a comfortable position once you're able to achieve it. So for everyone who's in America, this is a time where you really need to be changing your perspective of looking at what it means to emigrate and move abroad. Typically, when things are very static and status quo, there's a certain percentage of the population who wants to move abroad, who simply sees opportunities in places that cost less or have better tax advantages or better weather. That's a major one, or just a different lifestyle. You like the food from that place. Mexico gets a lot of people because their food is so amazing, and they have some really cool cities and weather. So that's a great example of people who move for completely culinary or climatic reasons. And that's a great reason to consider moving to a new country for sure. Growing up in New York and living much of my life in Texas, the weather's rough in both places. There's a lot of the U.S. that has very difficult weather, and a lot of the world has very pleasant weather for most people, and that is a driving factor. Coming from New York, many of the people that I talk to, because it's a wonderful place to live, the weather is a really major consideration for moving abroad. But now with the things going on in the U.S., you have a couple factors that are very important. One is that freedom of movement appears to be decreasing. Even within the United States, freedom of movement is not as open as it was before, and there is a very real fear that freedom of movement abroad is going to be curtailed. And that could come in the form of the United States restricting the ability to leave the United States. That is less likely, but certainly possible. That is an absolute real possibility, something that you should be concerned about, because once that happens, your ability to move anywhere is going to be extremely, extremely little. But if you're already outside, you're free and completely safe. But much more likely to happen soon is that other countries, because there is so many Americans moving abroad right now, we are seeing this for real, are likely to start restricting the movements of American citizens into their countries. And this may come in the form of restricting all movement into their countries. It could come in the form of restricting the movement of tourists, of newcomers coming into the country, and it could even become more extreme where people who have standing long-term visas and residencies may start having those revoked if the situation becomes really extreme. However, that is generally unlikely because those are restricted numbers that will attrition out over time. So any country can look at their numbers and say, okay, we're at our limit. We're going to stop taking new people now, and that number will slowly decrease because as people, routinely decide, well, that's not the right country for them, or they have a family event that they want to move back for, or they take a job change, they will lose a certain percentage of that population over time. And of course, as that population ages out, there will be a certain number of that population that simply leave the population, to put it kindly. And so you have this attrition rate. There's really rarely any driving factor to want to kick out people who have already obtained long-term residency or visas. and are being good participants in society. So that's generally not a concern. It sounds scary to a lot of people, but it's not really something that you generally have to worry about. Once you've established yourself in nearly any country, that country probably wants to keep you. They've been keeping you for some reason, so they probably want to keep doing so in the future. But if they've reached the number where they don't want more people, that's who they're going to start shutting out, because that doesn't create any animosity. It doesn't undermine existing businesses or opportunities. It just makes sense. So it's a very real thing that many countries are probably considering whether or not they need to start restricting U.S. or global migration into their countries, even as tourists potentially, but certainly as new residency acquisitions. So what does this mean? This means that you really need to do a few steps. One is you need to get a passport. So many Americans don't have passports. That alone makes you a prisoner of the country. A prisoner that you've created the situation. No one has done this to you, but the average American doesn't have a passport and has no option to get out of the country. Honestly, I think that's crazy. I would always want to have that form of protection. It is so easy. It is your right. It is part of exercising your Americanism to have a passport. And not just any passport, but a really awesome American passport. It's one of the world's most desirable passports. People all over the world really wish they have an American passport. A few people have another passport that they would never trade in for an American. They would just want the American as the secondary passport. But most people would actually trade in their passports for an American passport. It's really one of the best. It's not the absolute best, but it's up there and it's unique. So even if you have the best passports in the world, like Spain, Italy, and Germany, you still would like to have an American passport, because the places that they don't get to go really easily, Americans tend to. So they're really complementary, even though they're super awesome individually. So get your passport. No matter what you're doing, no matter what is happening, no matter what you think you want to do in the future, get your passport now. No ifs, ands, buts. There should never be an excuse on this. And importantly, traditionally, getting a passport for most of the pre-COVID era meant getting it in several weeks. When I first got my passport, I assume it was probably like 3 to 4 weeks to get my passport, my wife's passport, and then later in life when we got our children's passports, because we were traveling before we had kids, it was easy. No lines, no waits. But in most of the world, getting a passport is a 1 to 2 day affair. In the United States, it's typically many weeks. The efficiency of the U.S. is just not up to par with much of the world, which is something that shocks Americans to find out when they move abroad and find out that nearly everywhere in the world can do government functions in hours or days instead of weeks or months. But importantly, since COVID, and especially now, the length of time that you have to wait for a passport has moved from weeks to months to indefinite. Now, during COVID, we had waits that were in the years length. So that we totally expect that, because things shut down during COVID. But things have shut down again. We're already at a point where if you didn't get your passport in hand, you no longer have a guaranteed path to getting one. So anything you can do to get earlier in the queue, to get things moving, to at least get your name out there, you need to do. If any opportunity arises to get a passport, you must take advantage of that opportunity, because at the moment, there is every possibility that passports are no longer being issued. And this is something that people are not talking about enough. It is a really, really major issue all by itself for Americans, that the length of time to get a passport has now become essentially a barrier to exiting the country. And the future ability to get a passport is already in question. This is not a question of, will the government stop issuing passports in the future? The question is now, will the government start offering them again in the future? Because right now, from what we're hearing, they're already not being issued, which means, for all intents and purposes, the government has already closed the borders. They have not closed them to people who are coming into the country, although they're heavily curtailed, and they have not closed them to people who have exited the country previously and already have a passport. But people who need to renew their passports will lose the ability to exit the country in the coming future if things don't change, and people who have not yet received a passport are already unable to leave the country. And I talked to many people who've been in motion to leave the country for much of a quarter to half of a year and are totally trapped because they have been unable to receive their passports for all of that time. This is a really major issue. There is no way that you should ever hesitate on getting your passport as rapidly as you possibly can. This is not something to sit around on, because if anything were to ever go wrong, you lose all your freedoms by not carrying that passport. You have no options. You have no way to get on a plane. You have no way to cross a border. You are literally trapped. So that is something you have to do. The second thing you need to do is consider, and in between waiting for your passport to come, start doing your research. Where will you go? What will you do? How do you do it, right? Start doing that research. And there's a lot of information out there from a lot of places. Be careful. Anyone who's selling you services for moving abroad is probably scamming you. That is a famous scam. I'm not saying all, but assume if you've heard of them, it's a scam. And if someone tells you about them, that it's a scam. And if you do some quick research and they come up on searches, it's a scam. And if you say, I'm going to write to Scott and ask, because I found this guy, I'm sure that guy's not a scam, it's a scam. You don't have to write to me. It is, right? If you found a person and you feel that really confident that it's not a scam because they've got a lot of stuff, and it's a scam, right? Real people who are going to help you move places, they're really not going to be charging you. Yeah, you want to get on the phone with them and you want to use their time for you personally. Yeah, that's reasonable. That's probably not a scam because you're actively paying for exactly what you're getting and you're using their time. They have to charge something or else they have to be rich and just donating their time. And they can only do it to so many people. They have to do something. But information like this, there's no reason that someone would have to charge for it. Makes no sense. And if they are charging for it, it means they're withholding information that should be public. And if they really believe in the things that they're saying, yeah, there's a lot of people who are not going to do anything for free. They have no altruism. But if you have someone who has no altruism, they have no interest in making things good for you, you probably don't want to be paying them because they probably don't have a lot to offer you anyway. Paywalls are used when someone has content that they don't believe has value, and they have to get your money before you get the information. Someone who believes in the information and the value that they have is going to lead with the value because that's what proves that they have value for you. And if they're going to make money, it's going to be later. And I know if you haven't worked in business, you don't work with professionals who work in the knowledge space, but this happens across disciplines. Even if you're in software, the best software engineers are not hiding all of the things that they do. The best educators don't make you pay to get access to their education. People who are really knowledgeable and skilled, they almost always want to show off that they're knowledgeable and skilled. And if you want to pay them for that, they would love to be paid. But more importantly, they want to demonstrate that they're the resource, that they're the knowledgeable person. So it's great for them, and they know that they're doing good with what they do. Giving out good information is empowering to the world, and it's doing good. And so that's something that people that have the information that you really need are going to do. Every person that I know that has a valuable YouTube channel or relocation information, not one of them charges for the information. They may charge for one-on-one consultations where you are consuming their time, but that is as far as they will go. They're not going to sell you a book. They're not going to sell you a class. They're not going to sell you a checklist. They're not going to charge for a group tour. They're not going to, that's for relocation. They may charge for a group tour if you just want to do normal tours. That's a great add-on, right? They may charge you for a baseball cap with their logo on it. Of course, right? You want to support them, but the information, that value, should always be free if it has value. The value comes from it being given for free. So watch out for that. But you can go do your research, figure out what countries are amazing, figure out which ones are right for you, and don't be tricked by the people trying to scam you with second passports and you got to get this residency. The world does not work that way. There are situations where you need different citizenship, which would give you a passport, and different residency, which is a country by country bit of paperwork. So that is never something that someone can give you a universal answer on. If you say, I'm thinking I need residency somewhere, and someone says, yes, you do, they are lying to you straight up, and we can prove it. That is not a statement that can ever be said in that way. There are specific situations. If you said, I want to live in Spain and I want to do it in this way for this length of time, and these are the activities I want to do, and someone who knows the system in Spain says, for that you will need residency, that has every possibility of being valid. But if you say it generically, I'm looking for residency somewhere, something's wrong. Residency itself is never, ever, ever something you would seek on its own. It is a tool for achieving a goal. It is never a goal. So that's very important. And if you have any questions about that, we have loads of videos that dig into that generically and here in the country that I'm in, which we're not trying to push for you. It's a great country. I love it. You can easily look at my channel and figure out where I am. You don't need me to tell you. But if you're looking for that general information, start doing that. Start getting your life in order so you at least have the ability to get in the car, get in a plane, and get out. It doesn't mean you have to get out, but I recommend you actually do. For those who are concerned, this is the moment. We are seeing huge numbers of Americans, specifically. Last year we saw a big uptick in Canadians. We are not seeing that now, especially I think we may actually be seeing a decrease in Canadians, but in Americans we are seeing a massive increase. I've never seen anything like this on the ground. Just the number of Americans pouring into even the location we are here, which is one of the last places that Americans go. We get lots of Canadians, but not so many Americans. We are seeing Americans come in unprecedented numbers, at least at the moment over the last month or so. And when they didn't come as early as we expected them to, but we think a lot of that is probably because of high-cost flights during the holidays, and a lot of people were delayed because they couldn't get passports, so that changed people's schedules. They thought they'd just be able to move, and then they weren't able to. This is the moment that others are taking advantage of that move, and that means that both the U.S. and the places that they're moving to are seeing the emigration in one case and the immigration in the other, and your opportunities to become an expat may get less over time. And there's some really simple parts of this. Of course, we talked about the borders may close, but you may also find that hotels are full, flights are full. That's not happening yet, but those are real possibilities. But more importantly, in a lot of places, not here yet, but in a lot of places, we're expecting that the general cost of living, and especially the cost of land and buildings and properties, are going to start going up because Americans are rapidly looking to diversify their living portfolio. Not necessarily their financial portfolio, but that is coming too. But their life portfolio is being diversified, and people are showing up in new countries, discovering that they like it, and whether or not it's a good thing to do, many people simply feel it's important to buy property in the country that they're moving to, and many countries grant residency or even citizenship based on a purchase of land and some amount of time spent and a few other rules typically, but buying property in many countries is a path to some form of stable residency, and often the easiest one if you have those financial resources. So we expect in places like Spain, as an example again, which I've lived in the past and is a wonderful option for so many people, is likely to see large-scale increases in the cost of living and specifically in the cost of property and houses, because there are so many expats that are likely going to be moving there specifically and using that as a path to guarantee their long-term residency, because Spain is a country where you do need to do something. You don't naturally just have the ability to stay for a really long time without making some commitment to the country, generally financially. So that is a kind of thing we will be seeing. Here we definitely see purchases increasing. It's not wild. We're at a very depressed market. So some places are seeing increases, but you're not seeing increases in price, just increases in liquidity. Things are starting to move on the market, but these are early indicators. And if you don't get in motion now, you could be left behind. And that is really the idea that you need to have. You're at a moment where we are still early enough in the mass migration out of the United States that it could turn around. It may stop and it may not become a thing, in which case having that protection, having your ducks in a row, is not going to work against you in any way. It's always fortune favors the prepared, right? So get your ducks in a row, learn the things you need to learn, try some places, go travel. Don't make a big commitment to going somewhere. Don't make a big commitment to leaving the United States. Make a commitment to having your options open and learning the things you need to do, and getting those skills and investigating the world. But as that motion starts happening, the ability to simply go out and move at any time at the drop of a hat is going to get harder and harder. And right now, it's tiny bits of harder that is happening, except for that passport thing. That is unbelievably huge. And for all intents and purposes, they've begun the process of closing the border, hopefully only temporarily. But as this movement progresses, it is going to shift from being pretty easy, pretty open, to pretty hard, to potentially completely closed. And if you wait, if you take the very obvious American mindset that most people are going to have, that, well, I'm going to wait and see, I don't want to make a commitment, I don't like the emotional feeling of going out and getting a passport, it feels like giving up, it feels like I'm panicking, that is not a good reaction. If you hesitate on getting a passport, you're making a commitment to your own imprisonment. And I don't mean in a prison, but in a country that you are opting to not have the freedom to leave. And if you're an individual, yes, if that's something that's important to you, to commit that no matter what happens, you're going to be in for it. But if you have a family, you have a responsibility to protect them, and this is the moment to do so. Make sure you are as in motion as you possibly can be. Again, that doesn't mean actually emigrating out of the United States. It means being absolutely ready to do so should you need to, should it be the right thing for protecting your family or the right thing to ensure the best future for them. I'm really just asking people to be prepared and to consider your options. And of course, welcome to the channel. I'm so glad all of you are here. Please watch our other videos. Absolutely get down in the comments, ask questions. We have thousands of people here who have already moved or in the motion of moving out of the United States and Canada and some other places to here where I am and to many other places. We're a general resource. I do specialize in Latin America. I have lived in Europe. I have a pretty broad scope of experience because I've been living abroad for a long time. I am now settled. I have kind of a history of different mobility options, from being a tourist and a backpacker to living the kind of migrant life from country to country and eventually finding the right country and settling down and traveling from that country. So I can really dig into a lot of different aspects, and our community can dig into so many more. So I encourage you to ask questions, get involved. We have a WhatsApp group that is specific to the country that I am in, but the links, everything is in the show description. There's nothing to be sold in there. Everything is just free resources. There's not a ton of resources, but there's good ones down there. Also information on how you can send in a video question. We do have a GoFundMe for Marcela, who has cancer, from our show, and we are asking for some support. There's a video on the GoFundMe page that explains her situation, where she is with her stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma, and really great. Thank you so much to everyone who's been donating. We're already up to really close to half of what we think she needs, which is a total of 5,000. We've received just short of 2,400 at the time that I'm recording this, probably a lot more by the time you see it. We're just really grateful to have everyone here. Take a moment to hit that like button, watch some more videos. We have so many resources on here. We got playlists for different things, including general expat skills and concepts of like residency and citizenship, some information for Americans on taxes and tax credits for being outside the country and so forth. I'm sure you'll find things that are useful to you, and sometimes links to other YouTubers who have information as well. Thank you so much for joining me. I wish you all the best, and I look forward to having many of you start engaging here on the channel who are just discovering that the expat journey may be an important part of your future, and we're looking forward to seeing how we can help you and how you can join us in paradise, whether it's this one or another one. I will see all of you tomorrow.